Pre-present. Yeah, the dog.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 245 session. What is it and what is ODOT's current strategy, data governance? Let me read a little bio on Ian. Ian is the GIS manager for the Ohio Department of Transportation. He focuses on delivering technology solutions to improve workflows and agency efficiency. He leads multiple teams spanning transportation asset management, data governance, LRS, road inventory, GIS policy initiatives, and ensures ODOT meets various federal or state regulatory requirements. Success for his teams is defined through adoption of process-oriented strategies enabling continuous improvement methodologies. Ian has an undergraduate degree in sociology, GIS, and a master's in information technology management and GISP certification. Please welcome Ian.
Well, thanks. I think I know a lot of people in this room. I think I've seen the faces of more people. There's probably a handful that I've never spoken to, so hopefully I get to talk to you more. So I'm Ian, and we're talking about data governance. And I was asked to do this presentation, and I said, that's great. And then last week I found out it was 75 minutes long, and I was like, oh, wow. I didn't realize it would be that long. But I think I pulled together enough material, and please ask questions. You know, I was going to hopefully do Q&A at the end, but it's a small group, so if you have questions, just ask what it is. So data governance, like that's kind of a thing. It's a big topic. There's a lot of different things going on there. So how many people are in IT here? Okay, we got a lot of people in IT. How many people are in, I guess, like planning? Any planning people? Okay, we got planning. We got people from the districts. Yeah. Okay. Dad, what other group did I not get? Okay. All right. So I guess I just did that because when I think of data governance, and I spent a lot of time thinking about it, I kind of get one of these word clouds in my head. And I know people have seen word clouds, but sometimes my thinking is very linear and very like, we got to do this, and people who work with me probably realize that. Lots of times when I think about other concepts, it is kind of like a cloud. You know, you have all these things kind of floating around in there, all these different concepts that don't really have order. I'm not really sure how to make of it. As I think about one thing, something becomes more prominent, more and larger, and some things go to the back. And then as they shift and change, and the conversations and everything, it's hard to try to figure out where you're going. And I think right now, where DOTs are at, is very much that case with data governance. It's a thing that we want to do, but we don't quite have our hands grasp around what it is. I think at like a really basic level and simple level, when I see data governance, I think this. You know, on the right-hand side, we have these source systems that produce data. At ODOT's case, it could be the traffic monitoring system. It could be the SMS system. It could be the road inventory system. It could be any number of ones out there. And so that's over here on this side, they're collecting data. And then we try to push that data into some type of warehouse or clearing area to make it available to other applications on the other side that consume that data in some way. And I think when we think data governance, we get these type of problems, right? We have systems that were created at different periods of time, and we talk differently to one another, and there were different standards that were put in place. And then when you try to mash all that data together, you get these errors, or not errors, I should say, but issues. You know, one system might call it Franklin, while somebody might call it FRA, or FR, or whatever. And do we make a system change? Do we just create an ETL to push it that way? If we do that ETL, do we remember to change that ETL when that system changes or something downstream changes? There's all these different things that happen. And then as we dig more and more into it, we start noticing problems with the data. And when we start talking to people who own the data or work with the data, we start to get to this scenario that no matter what you do, you're going to kind of take somebody off because it's a change. And I think that's part of the big challenge with data governance. So, step back a little bit. What are your thoughts about data governance? I mean, have you heard the term before? Do we know why we're doing data governance or thinking about data governance? Anybody? It's just a good idea. It sounds like a good thing to solve those type of problems. When I think about data governance, I think about stuff like this. We're a Department of Transportation. We maintain transportation infrastructure so that people can get around, so we can support economic activity, so we can do different things. And that the way that people are using that transportation infrastructure is changing. The gentleman from Drug Ohio did a great talk this afternoon about automated and connected vehicles and how that's changing. These are some of those contributing factors that it's actually going to push some of that technology, but it's also changing other things. I mean, we're having population shifting. This is maybe not nation, or we're going to see this as a nationwide type of thing, but we are going to see these things in Ohio too. Population changes, where they're living and concentrations. I heard on the radio the other day, there's some ad running on the local NPR station where there's a Joanne from Coda is saying in the next, 5-10 years, there's going to be 1 million more people in the central Ohio area. It's a lot of people. That's a lot of people getting around in infrastructure and transportation. You got generational gaps, right? You have younger people who don't want to buy cars, but they want to get around. And you have older people who want to maintain their independence and still get around, but maybe they lack some of that mobility and physical capability that the gentleman was also talking about from Drug Ohio. And then you've got income inequality and all these different things. So this is actually something I think about of why we need to do data governance as an agency. Another reason is this. So this is put together by, I can't remember what the group is. It's some like civil engineering association that kind of pulls all the information from across the DOTs, and they kind of give us a grade card as a nation of where we are. And I bet if your kid came home with this grade card, you're probably not going to be too happy with this. I don't know how ODOT really compares or Ohio compares above or below this average, but I guess as a whole, it tells us we have a lot of infrastructure that's coming to the end of life, and we really need to solve this problem somehow. And then we also have this problem, where it's the money, right? It all comes back to the money. We have a gasoline tax, which is the major funding for transportation infrastructure in the country. And that gas tax has not been raised since the early 90s. When you combine that with inflation, we've effectively had a decrease in funding over the last several decades. We cannot buy the same thing that we used, the same amount of services and goods that we used to buy 20 or 30 years ago. So that hinders our ability to make good investments in our infrastructure and maintain that stuff that's coming to the end of life. And so we want to, lots of times we, as especially technology people, and we've heard, if you've been at ODOT for a while, we've heard these things where we're going to use technology to help make better decisions and do things differently. And so that's, I think, part of why the data governance initiative is important. And then, we're looking at all these graphs and everything, and then this is the other part of it, where I can just make crap up and put it up here, and you're probably going to believe it, because that's just how people, that's just the nature of people. And I think that's a problem that we have, is that if you find something, it's posted somewhere, it's on the internet, it's made available in an official looking report, you're just going to inherently trust it. And that's a problem for us as an agency. We need to have authoritative information so we can make good decisions, so we know where we need to make investment, where we have a poor performing road, either from a roadway design, like the service life, or safety factor, or other things. And if we don't know where the data is coming from and where it's going within our technology infrastructure and how it's being used, that's a big problem. So, asset management. Has anybody heard of asset management? I know this is a big thing out of the Division of Planning and Office of Technical Services we're pretty heavily involved in. And it's a component that is kind of driving some data management or data governance stuff right now. And so MAP 21, it was some legislation that came out a number of years ago from Congress, and it effectively said, we're putting all this money into this transportation infrastructure. Let's make sure that DOTs are actually, putting a plan around that and start measuring that performance of that. And these are, if you Google the federal highway and asset management, these are the key bullets. I just copied and pasted this stuff over. This is basically what the asset management plans are supposed to do. Fortunately for Ohio, we've been doing asset management, and lots of other DOTs too, been doing asset management for a long time. But we haven't formalized it in this sense yet. And so this is really helpful because it gives us a semi-equal comparison against other DOTs. Their plans might look a little bit different, but at least the metrics are somewhat similar. But then it gives us a way to communicate that more effectively within our own organization as well. When we look at this asset management plan in relation to data governance, I think this is kind of what we're seeing, is that it's asking us to make sure that we have systems that can create data so that we can establish metrics, so we can do analysis on that performance to figure out if we can improve our system. That's essentially what it's asking us to do. And if you've ever heard that concept of information as an asset, that's really what the asset management plan does. You know, we spend a lot of money collecting data on any number of things at ODOT. And I'm not sure we fully value that as an asset. You know, we value the bridge that we just spent $20 million on, and we expect to get $20 million in performance out of that bridge. But we don't really have an understanding of, well, are we getting $20 million of value out of that bridge? That could be, we expect that investment we just made to last 10 years. Is it lasting 10 years, or is it lasting 8 years? Why is it lasting 8 years instead of 10? Is that because of a change in usage? Is it because of some poor or substandard material that was put on that bridge or road? Or are we exceeding the return on investment that we expected? And if we are, what are we doing or what's occurring that causes that so that we can replicate that and improve that? Now that's what this is really getting at. And as far as the information as an asset, that information that we're collecting about stuff, we need to make sure we have the systems, foundations, and structure in place to really make sure that we can leverage that and do this type of analysis. And I think that's a big component of data governance. Some other whys for data governance. I have, there's a safety factor for this. Not only in crash analysis, but just getting people to the right place. Right now, ODOT in Ohio is actually, we have a program that's called the Location-Based Response System. It's been in place for 10 to 15 years. And we have a project right now that's working on completing this. And what it is, it's a county-by-county road network standard that has addressing and roads and signage and all these certain specifications so that 911 agencies can actually get ambulances and EMT people to the right location. And there was that horrible story in the Cincinnati earlier this year where the kid got trapped in a, it was in like a minivan, and he got trapped by that seat, and they just couldn't figure out where he was. And there's an initiative at the OIT level to implement next-gen 911 technology that completes this standard, and so that all those different emergency coordination services can communicate across their IT systems and do different things. Well, if they're going to do that, I bet there's going to have to be some consistent data to make that possible, right? So again, so that's a project that it's about $7 million project that that our group is running, and we had some safety funds procured that's helping us do that. So that's another important thing, another good reason why do we need data governance and why do we need to manage that. And that's a tricky one because that's going to be managing data across, I mean, there's 88 different counties, and then there's, I don't know, how many corporations are there in municipalities?
I'm not sure, there's 1,300 townships, but I'm not sure about how many different incorporated areas.
Right. So we got at least 1,400 different governmental organizations that we have to talk to, and probably another, however many thousands more towns that need to communicate and maintain that road network data for that emergency services. Now, ODOT's data governance initiatives aren't really going to focus on that, but this kind of highlights like what the LDRS program is trying to set up and the significance of it. Other things that more specific to ODOT, you know, we have, this one's a little hard to read, but we got systems like ELIS and EIMS where there's problems with the data itself, how it's being recorded and managed and the quality of it. And that's hurting our ability to use that data to make good decisions. And you know, you look at change orders that's happening. You know, what is our current capital budget? Isn't it like $5 billion? Something crazy, right? And what happens is people scope, or engineers scope projects based off the data we have, and they say, oh, we need to go out and do this type of work on this stretch of road. And sure, they go out and they do some visual things, but they're not going to catch everything. They're going to use the data to increase that efficiency. But then sometimes that data is wrong because we don't have good quality control checks, we don't have good governance in place, we don't have all those, we don't understand how everybody uses that information across the agency. Lots of times data gets created for one purpose, and somebody's like, oh, that's a pretty neat little piece of information. I'm going to use it over here. And you can do that, but you can also misuse information sometimes. And that results in change orders. And those are costly for us. If we let a contract with a construction company and we tell them these are the specs of the job, we sell them that contract, they get out there and they're like, this is not what you told me it was going to be, that's going to be another $10 million for this. That's another $10 million that we could have spent somewhere else, or we could have, you know, we're wasting time. It's just an inefficiency. So we do some estimates on, you know, we're going to see some increased productivity for employees internally. I think Drew and I kind of came up with this because we did some Gartner research, and there were different studies out there that did estimates on, you know, how long does somebody's trying to find some information and they have to pull it from a system and they have to clean it and manipulate it, get it ready to do that analysis, and then how long does that take? And then if you take that and say that's a job, like an analysis job, and then you extrapolate that across the number of people doing that type of analysis in an organization, across how many times they might need to do various analyses across a year, what's the efficiency you gain by decreasing that analysis time by making that data cleaner and more readily accessible? And I think we can improve our agency by doing that, just by communicating that. So there's any number of cost savings that we could potentially see through data governance.
Ian,
Yeah.
sorry, I can't read that from way back here. Can you just read your statistics?
Yeah, so I mean, we're kind of thinking like through different research that Gartner did, like large organizations said there was like a 47% increase in employee productivity for some things, just by having better data governance. Because you're making sure the information, because like, have you ever gone somewhere and pulled some data and you're like, I don't know if this is really accurate, and you spend time researching it or calling somebody and verifying it. That's inefficient. You should be able to trust the information that's being presented to you in an enterprise system and feel comfortable making and using it. And so that's just one example there. This is saying like a 25% reduction or up to 20% reduction in change orders and potential 15% savings on the capital program budget. Just by leveraging the information, we already have a ton of information in ODOT, and that's one of the benefits, the good foundations we already have. Data governance is going to look at, well, how can we leverage that information more efficiently? And that's what we're trying to do. So effectively, when you put all those whys together, this is kind of how I see it. We just can't afford to do this anymore. It's not that we were doing poorly before or saying that we were doing a bad job before. I think ODOT, when you look at lots of other states, we're doing a great job in a lot of things. It's just that things are changing and we need to be smarter. We can't do business the same way. So, what exactly is data governance? When you guys hear data governance, what do you think of? Consistency. What else?
interoperability.
Okay. Yeah.
Treats data and information as an asset.
What was that?
It treats data and information as an asset, similar to you would treat a bridge, piece of pavement, or anything like that.
Did you get that from somewhere?
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Some sort of standards?
Standards, okay, yeah. What else?
Data management.
What goes into data management?
How you will effectively manage data across different systems? What standards what standards do you use so that it could be easily shared across systems?
Yeah, okay. Any other thoughts?
Speaking the same language.
Speaking the same language, okay. Anything else? Data accuracy? Okay, that's good. I like that. Okay, well, I didn't really know what data governance was, so like, whenever I don't know anything, I go right to the internet. And when you search data governance definition, these are some of the top definitions that pull up. And so you can see there's a lot of different ways to define data governance, but there's some common themes there. And you guys hit a lot of those common themes. Management, organizing stuff. We're talking about policies and procedures and authority, practices. You got your availability and accuracy, or usability, integrity, similar to accuracy. So we got a lot of different things about how we could potentially define data governance within Ohio. When I think data governance, out of all these different concepts, I mean, I'm kind of a big pictures guy. I hate the weeds. But so it's when I think about it, I think kind of like this. This is really what data governance is to me. We have information systems and we have business operations. And it's not the strategy, it's one of the strategies that we will use as an agency to make sure that those things are aligned and working well with one another. And I use this continuous improvement process because it is a process. It's never, we did data governance, we're done. It's going to keep on going. It's going to change because our business needs change, our systems change, our people change. It's going to keep on going. That's how I look at data governance. And it's going to involve those structures that you guys mentioned. It's going to involve frameworks. It's going to involve different things. It's going to be a change. So, what's happening in the world of data governance? I've been very fortunate. I get to go. I'm on a few different national committees. I go talk to a lot of different people from other DOT agencies and even MPOs and Federal Highway and different people. And there's a lot of talk. Data governance is a really big buzzword right now. And so start looking at some industry trends I'm seeing across the nation. And you can see from this highly accurate and scientific survey on data governance that I put together that at least 56% of DOTs are doing data governance. Oh, you got it. You got it. So, I bet most DOTs really are. This is really just me going through my emails and on Friday last week, trying to figure out who I've talked to at other DOTs, who I've sat in meetings with, who I've been in peer exchanges with, and who I could find information from. And everybody's looking at this right now, trying to figure out how do we do it. And what we're finding is that, like ODOT, lots of DOTs, we've been doing asset management for a long time before we actually had a formalized asset management plan. Well, ODOT, we've been kind of doing some data management or data governance stuff, even though we don't have a formalized data governance plan. And so that's the same thing with a lot of other DOTs. And there's some good best practices out there. So these next few slides I pulled directly from some DOTs that came to Ohio last month to participate in the data governance peer exchange. And I missed the first day, but I made it the second day. So I don't know all the talking points on these slides, but I read them, and I was like, oh, these are some good things. So I wanted to share them with you guys. So Colorado, what they're doing is they had this slide in here, and it was titled Value Propositions. And I was like, oh, I like that. Data governance is all about, how do we leverage our information to be more efficient in our operations. And so they got those concepts of they want to turn raw data into actionable knowledge. That's a good component of data governance. And this holistic view, which informs enterprise data strategy. That sounds great. I'm not really sure what that means yet, but that's a pretty good view. And I really like this long quote here at the bottom. And I think a lot of what we heard earlier today, particularly that last line with the departments of transportation to the 21st century, required to respond to rapidly changing business needs, both within and across agency departmental boundaries and with third parties. That integrated data exchange that Drive Ohio was talking about, that is that last statement there. We have ODOT information is available in that integrated data exchange by Drive Ohio. And whether or not people are using it or not, that data is a good question. But can they use it? Do they have the right information about that data to make good decisions and build good applications on it? That's a good question. I don't know. So that's one thing that's the way one thing that Colorado looks at as far as their data governance strategy. They have a chief data office. They actually have an office that's dedicated to data governance in Colorado. And I wish I could have talked to the person on this. I missed them. But they have these high-level job descriptions. So I'm guessing they've at least staffed those 3 positions so far. I'm not sure if they just haven't staffed these last 2, or there's you probably know like a data scientist does, or analyst. They just look at that. But they have a chief data officer who kind of forms that strategy and governance and that policy. And you got this architect who kind of figures out how do we put this stuff together? How do we get these systems to work? And then they got a coordinator, a program coordinator, who oversees that implementation to make sure that it's happening in the right way. And then you got different support people to make that happen. I think that's pretty awesome. You got 5 people running data governance out of it. I think Colorado is a similar size as far as personnel to Ohio. We got about 5,000 people, a lot more if you count all the contractors. But I think they're about the same size. This was another slide that I liked. I'm not exactly sure what's going on in that conceptual roadmap, but I think it mostly has it's even really hard to see on this screen, but I think they're just trying to illustrate how they need to connect those silos. But it's really this: understand what exists, enable the access and context, and ensure that structure and foundation of a data governance program exists. So I really like those trends. So Minnesota Department of Transportation, they got some pretty interesting things there. So they've been kind of doing they officially started a formal data governance practice in 2008 actually. And then they went through this data business plan, and they put these data domain stewards, they built this business data catalog, and they've been kind of maturing through it. And they put together this structure where you have this governance council, the data domain stewards. We're starting to use a term in Ohio called data business owner. And you might have heard that floating around. And I think that's a parallel way to look at that. Data domain stewards, that's business owner. And then you've got subject areas. Or actually, maybe this is a little bit, theirs is actually a little bit higher. This would be like our deputy directors, I'm sorry. And then, which could be a data business owner in our case. I think that's how they have it set up. And their subject area stewards would maybe be like Tim Keller, who's an office administrator. He's over the bridge area and that type of stuff. So they got their structure. They kind of figure out how the standards and policies are going to be put in place, and then the directors look at those policies. They assign those roles and responsibilities, and then they have the people enforce them and implement them down below. And they have domains. They've actually officially created a framework for that data. And they say, these are the different domains of data that we have here. This is how we're going to start classifying stuff. And the coolest thing they did about that is they had this thing called the business data catalog. And so they hired somebody with a library science degree. She's a librarian by trade. And she manages and operates this application. And they go, it's an online data repository, And so they collect all the information they can from different systems, and it includes data definitions, it includes what system owns it, who owns it, how often it's updated, you know, all those wonderful metadata things that we say is a great idea, but we never actually do. They're doing it. And when you look at their cumulative business terms over the years, again, this is hard to see, but they're up to about just under 3,500 official business terms. And I think the coolest thing about this is new employees, when they show up for first day of orientation, part of the orientation includes this is how you get to the business data catalog, and they spend time going through it. Not everything, but I mean, think about that. If you were a new person at ODOT, first day in the job, somebody basically gave you a manual that said, if you have any question about anything at ODOT, this is a great place to start. Because it's going to tell you a definition about it, it's going to tell you what area or office is responsible for it, maybe who to contact, maybe how often something's updated, where can I access that information, all those different things. This thing's just amazing. Right? It's wonderful. So that's a great thing that Minnesota's doing. And then Michigan. So they're there, and I like this one because this is very similar to some stuff that we're doing here, and not only with already with data governance, but also with like asset management, different things. They have a steering committee, an IT steering committee. We have an IT tech council. There's a data governance council with a chief data steward, chief data officer type of position, and then they have a governor, which would be kind of like that steward, or the data business owner, or however you want to put it. And they have they kind of branch out, and we kind of got a similar structure that we're putting in place here. And then they use that pyramid where they set standards, enforce policy. They got some warehouses and glossaries and different things. So you can see it's all about they're putting that structure together and they're figuring out how to make those things work. What are these? Yeah, communities of interest. These are the things that they're important. So the common themes and challenges. That was a big one. Actually, I put that at the top. So I see this as one of the largest ones, is overcoming culture. How often have we heard, well, we've always done it this way? And quite frankly, it might still be valid, just because we've always done it that way. It might be a good practice. But just always default into that and not questioning it and being objective. Well, is it still a good practice or is it not a good practice? That's part of the culture change. We need executive support. Our leaders need to say, I think a lot of them say, yes, it's a great idea, but we don't necessarily get the backing we need sometimes. I think we need consistency on that for any large initiative. I think this is a big one here too. We got a lot of really smart people at ODOT and a lot of really enthusiastic people. And I know some people I work with, you start talking about a problem and they want to solve everything all at once. And all we do is we just talk. We get frustrated and we're done. And then we go to the next meeting. And then we come back, like we never solved that problem. Let's talk about that problem again. We talk. We keep on going around in circles and you can't solve it all at once. So we got to have a structured approach to that. This one's hard. I've had a lot of conversations with other organizations because a lot of executives are saying, you want to spend money on this data governance thing, what's the return on investment? Well, how do you quantify the efficiency that you're going to get by making better decisions? And that's a tough thing, It's like, especially if you have no baseline to begin with. Like, we don't know how long it takes to make a decision today, but I'm going to tell you it's going to increase your job by 47%, right? That's what we're saying. So that's a tough thing. That's a big challenge. Lack of understanding defining roles and responsibilities. If nobody's responsible for something, and it doesn't get done, right? That's that thing. Or if everybody's responsible for it, and then nobody's responsible for it. I think that's a big problem. We need to have clear roles and responsibilities. And then lack of communication and transparency. And that's always hard because you can have transparency, but then and I think ODOT is a fairly transparent organization, but I think that communication is hard to be aware of everything all the time and get it to the right people. And I don't know how you solve that. That's hard. That's real hard. Yeah.
I guess I thought of a challenge when you first put this up here and I expected to see it. I was thinking that expense is a challenge too, that fixing one data governance problem or some kind of, solving each one of these problems could be expensive. So that there's there's a barrier to moving into this. It's like, fixing this problem could cost you $1 million.
Right.
Or $2 million.
Well, I think that's this ROI concept, where you do have a lot of executives saying, you want this cash, what am I going to get for it? And those are the questions that are starting to happen. And I think it's actually good that government agencies are these are more business world terms, right? And I think it's good for us to start thinking in those terms and start working in those directions because we don't have an endless checkbook. And sometimes I feel like it is true that it's just money we pick from the feds, just keep on spending it, whatever. I don't believe that. I think that we need to be more accountable for that. We have to, quite frankly, because we don't have the cash, as I talked about earlier, to invest like we used to. So some other common things that I've seen from across the industry, people who are doing some level of data governance, what is being successful? Executive support, ongoing, consistent support. As you saw, particularly in Colorado and other areas, dedicated FTE. I don't think you can't just shovel this on top of somebody and say you're going to do this in addition to everything else you're already doing. You like to see that a lot. I think for a large initiative like this, we need a dedicated FTE, and I'm not sure what that's going to look like. It needs to be agile and non-invasive, and that agile in that sense where you need to be able to adapt and change quickly. We're not going to just set up a framework and say, well, this is how we set it up. We're never changing. It needs to be able to adapt to our needs. Incremental, we talked about, you can't do everything at once. And we probably already do have a lot of really good best practices in place. So why reinvent the wheel? We just need to structure and formalize those. And then it's a process that we're on. So, stand up. I've been talking. Stand up. Spin around. Say something. I know it's boring. I'm sorry. We're getting there. This is the halfway point. I never timed this one, so I don't know. Yeah. What's that? You don't have to keep on standing. I just wanted to move you guys around so you wouldn't fall asleep.
Start throwing this around.
Okay, so talked a lot about what I've seen and been able to hopefully share about what I've experienced and learned about data governance. Now let's talk about what's ODOT's approach. Where are we at? Where are we going? And the first part's like this in progress, and I think these are just things we've already done and we kind of have already in play, and then the long-term strategy. And some of this is going to be slightly skewed towards like stuff we've done in planning, and I think there's some good stuff going on in like engineering and construction. I'm just not as aware of it. I can't know everything. So I think that's part of the challenge of data governance, and that's why we need it, so we can communicate better. So the TIMS application, of course I got to champion that because it's awesome, quite frankly. Yeah, we used it, it's awesome. So TIMS first came out in like 2012 or 2013, and then we did a big refresh in 2014. That is this version that you see today. And the thing that happened when we put TIMS out there is people were like, oh my God, there's all this data. I didn't know we had this. This is wonderful. And then it was literally for like a year and a half, like my phone was ringing off the hook from all these other offices who were like, I want to get my data in TIMS. And I was like, oh, that's wonderful. If you want to do that, we got to get that out of Access. We can't do that. We can't leave that data in Excel. Let's move this into SQL. So we started to enforce some like minor like some little small tiny database standards, right? We started to standardize some things. I wanted to go much further. Like I can't remember who it was. I was actually trying to conform like data types and naming conventions at the time into this, but I couldn't, whoever I was working with, I couldn't convince them of this concept, why we had to do this, and it just didn't happen. But in any case, so we got all this data in here, and people want their stuff in there because it made their jobs easier, because it got their information to their customers easier, it made their employees' jobs easier, it was great. And then, of course, we started having all these, we started exposing the problems. The big one we always like to point out, structures here, there was all these bridges that were over in the Atlantic Ocean, and we're like, oh, you know about the bridges.
It was almost to 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a lot.
Yeah.
It was.
But it's not that it was bad, it was just how it was. They didn't have a need for that level of data accuracy, right? But once you made it available, people were like, well, that's not right, we gotta fix that. So that was one thing that's really good. So that's been some minor data governance type of stuff that this application has facilitated. I already talked about that asset management plan. We are doing it. We have an actual policy that kind of says we're going to do certain things. And then if you ever looked at it, you can find it on we have an asset management website, and I have a link to it later. These are in the back of it on page 73. We have specific groups of action items that are broken down into personnel development, capacity building, business process change, data integration and governance, technology and management information systems. Data governance is deeply ingrained in our asset management strategy because, again, it relies on quality data to make good decisions. When we look at that team, or we saw in those other agencies, they have that wonderful pyramid of structure and power, so that not power, but governance more. And this is what our asset management approach is. We have an asset management leadership team. We meet monthly, we communicate, we coordinate activities across our assets to make sure we're being as efficient as possible. And then there's this technology council. I know something about it. I don't know all about it. I know sometimes as a business manager, need to do something, and then I have to have people submit these POCs and PODs, get things approved, and they do things. And I don't know the whole process, but I think it's good because we're trying to minimize that footprint. We're trying to reduce redundancy. We're trying to get on the same page. I would everything they do. I'd be interested to see actually more out of the technology council. We'll see what that happens. And then, so other things we have going on. Does anybody know that we have asset management coordinators in the districts? People are aware of that? We have one over here. Amy's down in District 7 and 8. She does 2 districts. So that was a big initiative. Like that was actually a huge win. We're talking about staffing a need, right? Federal Highway came and said, you guys have to have this asset management policy. We turned around and went to the management and said, if we're going to do this right, we need people to coordinate this. And we got one for every district. That was a big win. Hopefully we can do something similar with data governance, depending on how that plays out. And the one thing that we do is we take that asset management plan and we've developed a specific work plan with actionable objectives with the, oh, Cody's here. I'm sorry, you're the other one. You're hiding. Cody's District 5. Yeah. We do, so we try to figure out, we got these things we need to do in asset management, how are we actually going to take action on them? We meet monthly, and we try to advance that and keep that moving. So we're putting structure around it. Has anybody heard of the Transportation Asset Management Audit Group? I expect some people have. So some people have. Okay, so I know you can't read this, but basically we work a lot with the technology council. Anybody heard of the collector application? Some people have? Okay. So what ended up happening is, Collector is this mobile data collector app where you can put it on your phone or your tablet, you can go collect data. And so we had this situation a few years ago where this tower light fell over and we had to deploy this really quickly. And it was one of those things where people were like, oh my God, this looks so easy to use. Let's use it for everything. And so we went with the technology council and we said, well, how can we how can we work through this process, or set up a process that we can deploy this, we can assess whether or not a business need will work for it, and if it can't, how can we deploy that quickly? And so that's what the TAM audit group does. We're a cross-functional group where we have people from planning, engineering, construction, different people involved depending on what the conversation is, so that we can effectively build requirements that meet the agency's need, not just one area, but the agencies. So basically there's 4 steps, or there's four main areas. First, is there an owner? We're not going to build anything if somebody's not going to own this system or process, because that's just a waste of time, because it's just going to fall apart. So we need an owner. After that, TAM audit group builds requirements and standards, and then we have a decision point. Is this something that we can develop with our internal resources, or is the requirement say it's too complex, so we need to go and do an RFP? If so, we already have the requirements ready to go, we go to market, and we do that, and then we go to solution. So we also implement some data standards. Again, some data governance type of things. These are components of the linear referencing system, which comes out of the road inventory. And this is significant because federal highway, there's now I can't remember if it's legislation or what it is, but it's basically saying, if you're spending money on a physical transportation asset, you have to have some of this information tagged with that asset as part of the funding application. And if I have one bridge that says, I'm at Route 40 log point 1, and I did an application for funding this year, and then I put another application for funding in the following year, they're going to be like, we just paid you for that bridge last year. Why are you asking for the same money this year? And they want the LRS to do that so they can do network analysis of where the money's going. Now, they're not super advanced on this yet, but Federal Highway will be as these things. So this integration has to happen across our systems now. So TAM audit group puts that in. And so this is an example of, again, some process we've done. So we have basically a 10-step process for the TAM audit group. The first 4 are basically walking through developing these requirements and figuring out what we're going to do. If it's a collector solution or something the GIS team can do, we do the steps in blue. If it's collector, it takes about 10 to 12 weeks for to push out that COT solution and get it into the hands of the customer. And so we just push that out. Here's a list of the stuff that we have in production right now, and this is what we're doing today. So we have a number currently in development. So again, this is an example of how we put some processes together and formalize it, we become very efficient and figure things out. I think that's something we can replicate with data governance. And these are some more examples of TAM audit group deliverables. We do requirements documents, technical specifications that we know we're applying. You can't read this at all. It's a very busy Excel sheet, but this basically tells this is like a logical database model. It's basically what this is. And so we can make sure are we replicating things, or we're updating correctly, or we're applying standards correctly. We're doing all those things. We have domains, drop-down lists, all that stuff that we need. We also provide inspection manuals. We're building these wonderful technology solutions, and we're handing them to highway workers, we're handing them to TMs, we're handing them all these people. Are they being communicated to collect the information the same way? Are they, so that they can rate this stuff the same way, and we're pushing these out. You know, this is for the ADA rights of way inventory manual. There's even drawings in there that say, you know, this is what you need to look at. RACI. You ever hear of RACIs from, if you've done the ITIL training? So it's like it's a roles and accountability matrix, basically. We're doing those also. Because if you look at it, it's hard to see, but all these things here are different steps in the process for inventorying and inspecting a culvert in this case. There's a lot of different people involved with it. And so we develop these swim lanes so you can quickly identify who's supposed to be doing what. Why is this important for data governance? Any idea? I mean, if you have people collecting data and there's a breakdown in that process, can you identify where that problem's happening so you can identify the person you can go to and you can solve that problem, you can correct it. And that's why this type of stuff is really important. So if you've never seen any of this stuff, we have a collector program SharePoint site. We post all those manuals there. We post all that stuff there so people who are using collector can go get that stuff on the spot. The asset management extranet site, we post a lot of stuff that's going on with asset management. So that is, I guess, it's not directly related to data governance, but it's a significant component of it. It's really helping us out. So something much more specific. In the fall of 2016, we hired a vendor to come in and help facilitate a data governance maturity assessment. We said we knew there was a need for data governance, but we weren't just going to go write some RFP that said, hey vendor, come in and do data governance for us and tell us what you think we need to do at that point. We wanted to figure out, well, what was the lay of the land? Where are we really at? And that's what this was. So we did a custom maturity model, an online survey, rounds of SMEs, we interviewed people, and then we got some recommendations. Anybody, maturity models. Is anybody, people familiar, not familiar with maturity models and how those work? I know some people in here are. Are some people not familiar with maturity models? I'm assuming. Yeah. Okay. So, and I think this is, if you're not, we can use these with ITIL. We probably will end up using these with ITIL. They work very well hand in hand. So, the maturity model basically says, take anything you're doing, and we're going to basically rank it on a 1 to 5 scale. And you can get very specific on it, but basically you have your initial, repeatable, define, manage, and optimize. And you can get very specific on what these categories mean and how you're applying them, but generally what they mean is initial, everybody's just kind of doing whatever they want. You know? Somebody over here, I asked somebody to go plant that tree or whatever. They're going to plant that tree one way, this person's going to plant that tree a different way. Or I'm going to ask them to, whatever it is. Very ad hoc, not repeatable, not defined. At repeatable, we're kind of doing the same thing, kind of the same, because we're seeing some success, but got some established process, but it's not really formalized. And that's where we get to the defined process, where we've actually documented, this is how we're going to do it. And we're applying it. Now the big difference between define and manage is we're actually measuring, well, we said we're going to do it this way, how often are we actually doing it this way? Are we doing it that way 80% of the time? 90% of the time? Or how much do we need to know how often we do that? And then when you get to that optimized, you can actually get to this continuous improvement processes because you're measuring how well you're doing it, you can see where you're succeeding and failing, and you can figure out how to improve. So when you take a capability maturity model concept on a 1 to 5 scale and you apply that to, in this case, these are a bunch of different categories of that you can apply to data quality. So you get your data sets. So you got data quality, policy, your organizational strategic to it, the data accessibility, data usability, system integration, privacy, security, metadata documentation, performance or risk management of data, service delivery, collaboration, knowledge management, awareness outreach, resource allocation, and tools and analytics. You can kind of figure out where you are and where you want to be. In this like spider-looking diagram, that blue line represents where you currently are. And then that outer line, I can't tell if that's green or whatever, is where you want to be in some period of time. 3 years, 5 years, 1 year, whatever it is. And so you can figure out, well, we got this gap, and then we can take what steps do we need to take to close that gap. And you can translate those into specific work activities. So that's what this data governance assessment did. When we look at this, so you can see we're not doing, at the time we weren't doing so well in organizational strategic, but we were doing pretty well with data accessibility. And then we kind of fell in between with all these other different categories for data governance. And then, I'm not going to go over all these, but they're there. These are for different data areas. So we got like pavement, bridge, culvert data. You can see where the agency, it was interesting with a lot of these conversations because you'd go to like the owner of a data set and you'd say, how good is your data? Is your data quality really good? And they'd be like, oh yeah, my stuff's great. And then you go to their customer and they'd be like, how good is this guy's data? And they'd be like, oh, I don't know about that. And then you kind of have to negotiate, well, is it a 5, is it a 3, is it a 4? Let's go with a 4, okay? So that's kind of where this is at. So we rated all this stuff and tried to figure out where do we need to be. And so we got like program management, road inventory data, construction data, finance, traffic counts, project development data, infrastructure management data, barriers, BMP, overhead signs, roadway maintenance. I'm sure you all want to look at that stuff in excruciating detail if you download the slides, but it's there. And there's a big report on this where there's actual comments about usability and things there, so it's good stuff. So, our ODOT's recommendations from this study are these. At the top, we need some people to do this work. We need somebody to oversee this. We need some framework, we need some policy, we need to update some IT board, and it looks like that's kind of in progress already with some of the stuff that Charles has done. We need to get some training. We talked about that alignment earlier, you know? Is the IT strategy aligned with business needs and vice versa? When you look at business intelligence, warehousing, how do we standardize data and incorporate spatial and enterprise? Because everything we do has location. And if we're trying to figure out if we're investing in a certain spot in a certain way, and it's working well, we need to know. Of course, I'm the GIS guy, I'm going to champion that one. So that's kind of summary of our in-progress stuff. Not too much more. So the long term, we're at this point where we want to implement those recommendations. And so we're starting to craft that mission and vision. You know, that mission is our ODOT mission statement. And we want to make sure anything we do is aligned with that. And our vision for data governance is we need that standardization, coordination, and integration of everything so that we can make those better decisions. It's going to be that culture change we talked about. And it has to align with those ODOT critical success factors. I don't think we should do anything unless it's aligned with those critical success factors. And that's another good ITIL concept, if you've done that training. Do we have a reason for doing this? Is it providing value? If it's not providing value, let's not waste our time with it. It's not worth it. We need to set up, again, some more of that structure. These are different groups that we think will greatly drive the data governance, and we need to formalize and actually establish a group to do that. Whether or not if that looks something like Colorado, where they have 5 people staffed in an office for that, I don't know if that's going to be. It'll be interesting to see. And we're going to need to put some structure together, similar to we have with asset management, top-down and bottom-up approach. We have some conceptual data flows, lots of the stuff we're already doing, but we just need a maturity model. We need to formalize how we're doing that and make sure that's formalized and standardized across the agency. Collect, validate, distribute, planning, and update that data. And we got to establish responsibility of who's going to do what across all those different items. From a technical flow, we might need to look at how we're pulling stuff from inventory systems, pushing it to a staging area into a warehouse that's actually a true warehouse. I think we have a lot of different warehouses around, depending on where you go, and you might get different data depending on which one you go to, and when you go there, and that's a problem, right? So I think I was talking to this guy on District 10 email the other day, and he was like, "Is Storms?" I was trying to update this query, and Storms is no longer working. And I was like, "That was turned off a few months ago." You know, that's a problem. So we need to do that type of stuff. So here, this is our roadmap. We actually have, what day is today? Is it? It's the 5th. So we have an RFP that went out yesterday. And so we're going to start getting solicitations back at the end of the month. And this is what we want the vendor to help us do, because it's going to be a big project. Phase 1, we're going to build that foundation of standards and measures. We're going to hopefully establish some rules, some FTEs, and create that strategic plan of how we're going to implement this stuff. Phase 2, that's where we really define those data standards, and we set up that additional structure, and we start exploring the real BI needs that we need for this. And it's not really until stage 3 that we do anything with technology. That's when we start actually doing technology changes. And there might be some retrofitting of systems. Actually, I would anticipate us to retrofit systems. And when you look at these dollar amounts here, people always ask about money sometimes. I think it's going to cost much, much more than this to really fully implement this. We had to reconstitute this project, and we were told to cap it at $5 million at this time. But I think I think what's happening now is we're going to use this $5 million to better assess what fully needs to happen as part of that plan, and then so by the time we get to phase 3, we'll know how much it's going to cost to retrofit the system, because we don't know that right now. That's really hard to estimate. And so that's probably going to cost much, much more once we get down to that stage. And it might not be complete retrofitting all systems. Maybe it's updating things. Maybe it's just setting standards for when new systems come online. I don't know. There's going to be a lot of that. So overall, I think we've heard a lot of these people, processes, and technology type of thing. This really is all about this too. It's not any one of those components. It's all of those components together. So I think that's all I have to say about that. And do we have any questions? Any comments, any discussion? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, you missed it.